You know those old mine sites that dot the Australian landscape? You know, the ones that everyone wrote off years ago? Well, according to my guest today, we might need to think again about them. Today, we're going to explore how new technology is actually breathing life into these forgotten assets and why this could be one of the most overlooked opportunities in the resources sector. Now, I'm joined today by James Cooper, our man, our resident geologist and resource investor and expert. James, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Woody. Good to be back.
Yeah,
Good to be
yeah.
here again.
Now, James today he draws a fascinating parallel between today's mining innovations and a breakthrough from the 1980s that transformed worthless oxidized copper ore into valuable assets overnight. Now, what's happening now could be even bigger, and it's what he calls transformer stock. So, James, let's start with something really interesting from your Factel Daily piece today. This is the idea that we're at a convergence point between new mining tech and higher commodity prices. Could you walk us through why this particular moment in time might be special in this regard?
Okay, so imagine you've got these deposits from the last mining boom that never really made it. So they sat there, they've been sitting there now for almost 2 decades, sitting there idle. Nothing's happened with these companies. The share prices have just really fallen flat for the last 10, 15 years. Now, all of a sudden, you've got changes in technology, rising commodity prices. So this convergence, these two important factors, suddenly start to make these deposits a little bit more interesting in terms of for investors, but it also makes it more economic because as we know, with as there's a depletion of deposits over time, lower grades become more economic. So something that was, say, 0.5% copper grade 15 years ago was overlooked. This is not economic based on the today's conditions, but then 15 years later, 0.5% copper grades might be an excellent or highly economic sort of deposit to mine. So couple that with big changes in technology, and you can actually access different types of ore, so deeper deposits, more difficult engineering constraints, which were unavailable sort of 15 years ago. So this is what our transformer stock, so transforming these old deposits that were uneconomical 10, 15 years ago. But thanks to rising commodity prices, thanks to changes in technology, all of a sudden these deposits are now mineable.
Yeah. You use the example of how SXEW, is that how you pronounce it, technology revolutionized copper mining in the 80s. What specific modern technologies do you see having similar transformative potential here today, and why?
Yeah, okay. So the solvent extraction, electrowinning, it was this big thing in the 1980s. Really revolutionized how processing in copper was taking place, because before that you could only process fresh ore, sulfide ore. That's through smelting. But
Yep.
this new process allowed this sort of vast untapped oxidized ore that couldn't be processed. So this is just how sort of changing technologies can really bring in new suppliers into the mix. So some of the innovations we're kind of seeing come through today, all across mining, exploration. So one of the ones kind of relates to my area as a geologist. It's hyperspectral scanning machines. So this is something I actually saw in person back in Sydney, the Sydney conference. They had some on display, and you're putting core, so drill core, through these machines, and it essentially just logs it, just using these different, we call them hyperspectral, infrared kind of electric impulses and all sorts of scientific measurement tools. But anyway, it logs the core just as a geologist would log it. In fact, some people believe it's more reliable because it's using these machines which are consistent. It hasn't got the human error. It hasn't got one geologist logging the core, then another geologist stepping in, looking at it from a different perspective. So it's consistent. Um, it's often more accurate. But for miners, the key thing it's cheaper,
Yeah.
and it's also quicker. So two areas or two innovations, allowing miners to sort of do things more cheaply, and then potentially make deposits that were sitting on the fringe or more marginal more economic, because you can then drill and scan a huge amount of core that would need maybe 20, 30 geologists. And you could
Mm.
just do that with a couple of machines.
And I guess it'll
Um,
help bring their product to market quicker, right? Which leads to more
exact,
profit margin.
exactly. Yeah. 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 Improving the profit margins. There's all sorts of technologies coming through now. They're in the testing phase, and sort of I think they will be released in the sort of next 2 to 3 years, which could
Mm.
really change how mining takes place. There's the CSIRO, which is Australia's sort of leading research government funded organisation. This is using a neutron technology, which basically
Right.
fires these impulses into the drill hole directly. So then you don't have to send the samples off and wait weeks or months. It's giving you this instant feedback on what is actually in the drill hole. So what types of rocks, how much copper is there, how much gold is there. So this is just another example. There's heap leaching, so on the processing side, where miners who traditionally use sulfuric acid, has problems, environmental issues, now using microbes, so bacteria. So it's getting past all the environmental issues, and making it a lot more sort of easier to get permits, which is another key delay in mining. So making it easier to get sort of new deposits, new
Yeah.
projects underway. And then I could keep going on and on, but
I
I'll
guess,
just do.
yeah,
Sorry,
go
you
for
go.
it.
Okay, I'll just do probably one more that's um, really probably a big game changer in terms of actual mining, and that's the automated, so drill and blast machines, automated driverless trucks, which can now just go to places that are maybe inaccessible or more too dangerous for actual people to go. So you've got these automated vehicles. Which are accessing deep underground mines. So this is just making it again cheaper, and potentially safer for a lot of these big miners. So again, improving profit margins and potentially making these marginal deposits more economic.
Yeah, you make an interesting distinction. You mentioned like the companies transforming old mines, and you call these specifically transformer companies. But you make a distinction between those and regular explorers, particularly that they're often similarly priced similarly, despite having proven assets. So, what can cause that market oversight, and what typically triggers a revaluation?
Yeah, I think what the market does, it often gets excited by a new company. It's an explorer. It doesn't necessarily have any assets under its belt. It just has an exciting story behind it, and maybe some keen geologists and a patch of dirt to explore on, and that's really it. But then you compare it to these companies which have sat idle for 10 or 15 years, that do have tangible assets that could actually be money generating assets within a few short years from these changing technologies. And considering that these types of companies are being priced somewhere near these emerging explorers, I think really represents the value that investors can catch once the market does recognise how quickly these assets could actually be converted into sort of actual revenue. So it's
Yeah.
I think it's a value play, and it's something that I think will become more apparent as commodity prices rise.
Yeah, and it's across all resources too, right? I mean, in your new report, which is out today, you focus specifically on abandoned gold, but it's across all the other resources too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you look at definitely gold in Australia, and a lot of copper projects, probably more so South America, overseas copper projects. But you're right, it does cover a whole host of minerals. You got to remember that commodities are so cyclical, boom and bust. So projects that were uneconomic years ago are now starting to re-emerge because of this general broad lift in commodity prices. Of course, we're going to see
Yeah.
that with gold projects first, because gold prices are breaking out to all new time highs. They're still sitting at elevated levels. So
Yeah.
I think we'll start to see these gold projects, abandoned gold projects, start to come online first, and that gives you a good clue of what could happen for things like copper, silver, and other minerals as well, as
Yeah.
other commodity prices strengthen.
But it kind of leads to my final question about the opportunity in front of people at the moment. Is that you make a fascinating point in your piece? It's about how these companies trade like explorers, but without the exploration risk of a
Yep.
company that, say, doesn't have any deposit currently. Can you just finally, just to wrap up, to elaborate on how investors should think about risk reward when evaluating opportunities in transformer stocks compared to traditional junior miners?
Yeah, so these transformer stocks, you still class them
Of course, yeah.
as junior stocks. So just like an explorer, because of their market caps are very low. But the exploration risk is really something that I don't think investors probably consider
Mm-hmm.
when they compare it to these juniors that actually hold undeveloped assets. And I think that's partly driven by the excitement of a new IPO, a new explorer coming on board and getting sort of active drill results into the market. But you got to think, are these drill results, is it tangible? Is it going to result in a producing asset in 3, 4, 5 years time? And compare that to these transformer stocks, these juniors. I think 3 or 4 years, some of these companies could actually be real producers, real
Yeah.
income makers. So I think that's where the value is.
Cool. Well, everyone, thanks so much for your time today, James. Everyone watching at home, do look out for James's special presentation out today on this very opportunity. It will be out today and it will be available to all Fat Tail Daily readers. Check out James's piece today in the link below. And yeah, I'll speak to you next week. I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you. Cheers, James.
Thanks, Woody. Cheers.